Yeah.
So, yes, it is. I hear, has it been decided that we're going to shut down at noon?
That's what this, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Closing at noon.
Okay.
I'm sure.
Yep, there it is. Ready?
Good morning. I'm going to call to order this public meeting of the Arapahoe County Board of County Commissioners for October 29th, 2019. To my left is County Attorney Ron Carl. To my far right is Jolene Sanchez, the clerk to the board administrator. Ms. Sanchez, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Conti?
Good morning.
Good morning. Commissioner Sharp?
Here.
Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Jackson?
Here.
Commissioner Baker?
Here. Commissioner Sharp, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Carl, are there any modifications to the agenda this morning?
There are no modifications.
The commissioners have been given the agenda, and are there any questions, comments, or concerns? I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I will move to approve the agenda as presented.
Motion made by Commissioner Conti, seconded by Commissioner Holland. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries. The agenda has been adopted. This is the time that we've set aside for citizens to comment on any non-agenda items. If you're here for one of the public hearings, then there will be time for public comments for that specific public hearing. But this is a time for citizens to address the Board of Commissioners on something that's not already on the agenda. Are there any citizen comments this morning? Seeing none, we will move on from the citizen comment period. We have one set of minutes to approve. Those are from the public meeting on October 8th, 2019. Commissioner Sharp and Commissioner Holland, you were absent and excused on that day. So, are there any questions or motions from any of the other commissioners that were in attendance?
I'll move to approve. Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Conti. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
And no objections, then that motion does carry with 2 abstentions. We have a number of items on our consent agenda this morning. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns about any of the items? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Sharp, seconded by Commissioner Jackson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Under the general business items, we have the first general business item is the 2020 Public Trustee Budget Presentation. The chair and the board recognizes Sue Ryden as our presenter. Do we need to lay the foundation for this, or is that something that we just normally do?
There aren't any special publication requirements for this, and it was properly noticed.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Ryden.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair, and to the rest of the commissioners. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning, and I feel very fortunate that I was able to get here this morning. As all of you, I think, feel the same way. I am really pleased to present the 2020 budget for the Arapahoe County Public Trustee's Office. As you all know, Colorado's public trustee system is unique among the 50 states. The legislature created this system in 1894 during a deep recession brought on by the silver crash of the early 1890s. They wanted to create a process that was efficient, economical, and fair to all parties involved in the foreclosure process. Essentially, they moved almost all real estate foreclosures from the courts to the public trustees. The deed of trust secures the loan on a property and gives the public trustee the authority to sell the property if the borrower defaults on the loan. We play a quasi-judicial role as an impartial referee, making sure everyone follows the rules as set forth by the General Assembly. We are self-funded through fees set in statute. Since 1894, the public trustees in the counties with populations over 50,000 have been appointed. At the beginning, Arapahoe County was the only one, and that's when Denver was in Arapahoe County. As Colorado grew, 9 more counties changed to appointed public trustees, and the state Supreme Court appointed these public trustees until 1909, when it became the governor's responsibility. The selection process for the appointed position has been rigorous, with requirements that include a 4-year college degree and 5 years of administrative or business experience, or 10 years of administrative or business experience. The Office of Boards and Commissions has oversight of the appointed public trustees. Currently, these 10 offices handle about 75% of all the foreclosures in the state. And the treasurers in the remaining 52 counties have always served as the public trustees as their population was under the 50,000 threshold. On July 1st, 2020, all county treasurers in the state, except Denver and Broomfield, will become the public trustee of their respective counties, including Arapahoe County. Until then, all of us in the Arapahoe County Public Trustee's Office remain committed to providing prompt, professional service to all involved in the foreclosure and deed release process. So now to the 2020 budget. I will first give you a summary of the budget and then take any questions that you might have. In preparing the budget, I want to again thank County Attorney Ron Carl for assigning Assistant County Attorney Monica Cavacci to us. She is a valuable resource in providing legal advice on many matters that come to our office. As you know or may not know, we are not lawyers. Some public trustees are lawyers, but we are not allowed by statute to give legal advice. So when we have an issue that we think needs to have some legal advice, we turn to Monica, and she is always there for us. I also want to thank the Board of County Commissioners and your staff, as well as the clerk and recorder and her staff, for partnering with the Public Trustee's Office to provide a high level of customer service to the public. All public trustees are required to prepare and present their annual budgets to their boards of county commissioners and to the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. The budget process is also set in statute. October 15th is the deadline for the public trustee to complete the proposed budget, and then we must hold a public hearing to allow comment. This year's was held on October 23rd following our regular foreclosure auction. Pursuant to CRS 29-1-106, parentheses 3, parentheses A notice of the public hearing was published in the Sentinel on October 10th. If you'll turn to page 4 of the budget that I hope you have in your hands, you will see our current fee schedule and our projected revenues for 2020. As you know, our fees set by the legislature have not been raised since 2001. For the first 9 months of 2019, we have experienced an increase in the releases of deeds of trust following 3 years of decline. And in fact, in the last 2 months, we have probably seen a 50% increase in releases, and this is due to the low interest rates and people refinancing. So this is the first year since I have been public trustee that we have seen an increase, and it has really ballooned just in the last couple months. Who knows how long that will go on, but it is happening right now. Foreclosures have ticked up slightly, sort of reversing a downward trend, but still not enough to say it's a trend upward, but we know this is secular. The number of releases of deeds of trust increased from 24,024 this time last year to 24,400, a slight amount, but since this was September 30th, and since then, we've seen a big increase. The number of foreclosures filed is also up from this time last year from 490 to 498. Today, we remain at a historic low point, opening only about 10% of the number of foreclosures we were doing at the height of the foreclosure crisis in 2010. Over the past 4 years, we've gone from 730 foreclosure starts to 706 to 638 to an estimated 575 this year. We're projecting a similar number in 2020. On the expense side of the ledger, we remain frugal, but the cost of providing services continues its upward trajectory. Payroll and benefits take the lion's share, and as you know, as a separate office, we're responsible for our own payroll, benefits, and all the human resources services. Software licenses, hardware upgrades, and general office expenses contribute to the expense of providing public trustee services as required by Article 38 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. Predicting future numbers is virtually impossible as we have no control over the forces that impact our revenues. And this business is cyclical, and no one knows when or how fast the cycle will start up again. So to recap, please turn to page 11. You will see our budget estimate for this year and our projections for 2020, and you'll also see the budgets for the 5 previous years. In anticipation of the coming merger, I am providing you also with breakouts for the first and second half of 2020, which you should see on a separate sheet. I think it's called Attachment B. So we're projecting $555,500 in revenues and $371,343 in expenses for a net income of $204,157. This amount will be transferred to the county, along with an anticipated reduction in the reserve of $17,174. Now, keep in mind, these are all estimates. They can change a lot. If you would turn to page 10, the top graph shows the trend in revenue and expenses. Revenues outpaced expenses fairly significantly over the previous 4 years, but the margin has shrunk over time as revenues have declined more than expenses. And as you know, we're required to maintain reserves that are equal to the previous year's expenses. This gets a little complicated, but once our required reserve is met, all revenues in excess of expenses are transferred to the county. So at the end of the year, we see whether we've had enough revenue to cover our expenses. If not, we can take it out of the reserve fund. If we have made enough money to keep that there, then that money goes back to the county. And because our expenses have increased year over year, our 2020 reserve fund is anticipated to be higher at $392,600 versus $371,322 in 2019. So the bottom graph on page 10 shows the excess revenue the Public Trustee's Office has transferred to the county since 2014. And to my knowledge, it is the only office that serves the county that actually has this kind of cost-benefit analysis that is done each year based on what fees are charged and what revenues come in and how much money goes into the general fund. So once again, I'm proud to say that the Arapahoe County Public Trustee's Office is a leader in the state for performance and efficiency. So thank you for your time and attention today, and I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions? Commissioner Holland.
Yes. This relates to the trend in types of houses that go into foreclosure. Could you kind of give us an idea of the value on average of those homes that are being foreclosed upon?
Well, the values, it's really the amount of money that is owed that is what is actually, the foreclosure happens, and that's what the lender is trying to get, is the amount of money that is still owed to them. I would say that they parallel what the values were whenever that loan was made. If it was in the early 2000s, it's going to be in the $200,000 or $100,000 range. Now it's coming up into the 4s and 5s. We're seeing more of those. But I would say that I feel as if, and of course the numbers are small, so it's hard to get a real statistical trend, but I feel from looking at what comes in that we are seeing a number that were first purchased in 2017 and 2018, which to me personally is maybe a sign to kind of be watching what's going on, as opposed to a loan that's like 8 or 9 or 10 years old. So people that just bought a home 2 years later are in foreclosure.
So basically, in your judgment, it looks like people who have gotten into loans way beyond their capability of fulfilling their.
That could be something that you might want to keep an eye on going forward.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, I just want to thank you for your service. I'm not sure what the timeline is for I think you called it a merger, but because of the actions at the legislature, your office is going to merge with our county treasurer's office. I understand that. And so I don't know if we've had another chance to thank you for your service to the county and all of the fine work that you've done these last several years. So I just wanted to say that in public.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that will happen on July 1st, and the current treasurer, Sue Sandstrom, will become the public trustee.
Right. Okay. Well, hopefully that transfer is going smoothly, and we all wish you the best. And I know we'll have more opportunities to thank you.
Commissioner Sharp.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you too. Appreciate everything you've done in the public trustee's office the last number of years. So thanks very much. And thanks, excuse me, for make sure that this transition goes very smoothly. And just wanted to express my thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Sue, again, I want to voice my congratulations and accommodations for a job very well done. We thank you for the incredible way that you have managed this department and the fact that you continue Arapahoe County's exemplary example of great customer service and efficiency and service to the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Holland.
So I just want to echo what my colleagues say. You came into a very difficult situation when you were appointed. You turned that office around, and now it's leading the state in efficiencies and innovation. I'm very grateful for your work, and we're hopeful that. Well, I'm confident that legacy will continue under the change of leadership. But just thank you very much. And public service is not an easy task, and you attacked it in your entire career, taking on controversial issues and finding credible and compromising solutions. So thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. And I want to say I have a fabulous staff that is doing wonderful work every day, and you can count on them to continue serving you.
I'll echo ditto, and the chair recognizes Sue Sandstrom, our treasurer, for a few comments.
As public trustee, excuse me, Ryan has stated we are in a transition process. I would like to thank public trustee Ryan for preparing the budget. We did go over it together. The transition process is moving forward. It's complicated. Her staff and the public trustee have been very helpful in working towards that. We plan to continue the high level of service that she and her staff have provided to the Arapahoe County citizens and the industry that is involved in the foreclosure process. But I want to thank her very much for including me in the budget process and assure all of you that the transition will be smooth and it is moving forward.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? This is a general business item, a public hearing, citizen comments not required, but I'll just ask if anyone was specifically here to speak about the public trustees budget, and I don't see anyone. So with that, if I can, I'll make the motion. I hereby move to recognize and to receive and acknowledge the Arapahoe County Public Trustee 2020 budget.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Holden. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Here he comes. Next on our agenda is item 7B. This is a public hearing on the 2020 recommended budget. Our presenter this morning is Todd Weaver, the budget manager from our finance department, and our attorney on this matter is John Christofferson, the deputy county attorney. Mr. Christofferson, would you set the foundation for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of this item today is to hear a presentation of the 2020 budgets, open a public hearing for public comment, and then continue the public hearing until December 10th, 2019, at which time the board will consider adoption of the 2020 budgets. The record should reflect that notice of the proposed budgets was published in the October 24th, 2019 issue of the Villager newspaper. Therefore, this board, and acting as the ex officio board of the Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Public Improvement District, have jurisdiction to consider these 2020 budgets.
Thank you, Mr. Christofferson. Good morning, Mr. Weaver.
Good morning, board. I have a presentation that summarizes the contents of the 2020 recommended budget. It is the same presentation that was provided to the Board of County Commissioners and internal staff at a study session on October 22nd. I'll move through that, and if there are any questions throughout the presentation, I can take those as we move along. The process for 2020's budget is similar to prior years. The budget requests came in July. They were reviewed by staff and the Executive Budget Committee in August, September, in preparation for presentation of the recommended budget before you today. The Executive Budget Committee, which is comprised of Commissioner Nancy Jackson, Commissioner Nancy Sharp, Treasurer Sue Sandstrom, and Open Spaces and Intergovernmental Relations Director Shannon Carter, worked on putting this recommended budget together. They had 4 main points that they were kind of working off of as they assembled the budget. The first 2 have been cornerstones of the budget process for quite some time, and that is continuing to structurally balance that general fund operating budget, maintaining the county's total compensation philosophy for salaries and benefits for county employees. But for this year, limiting the growth in operating expenditures, preserving an adequate level of fund balance, and funding requirements and mandates was another main tenet of the budget, followed by continuing focused investments in the justice system, public safety, and transportation capital improvements. The recommended budget before the Board of County Commissioners right now does not consider the outcome of the proposed ballot initiative 1A that voters are currently considering. If that were to pass, then we would have to revise this budget to include those revenues and necessary expenditures. Some quick facts on the budget. The total revenues across all funds is $419.6 million. In the general fund, that's just slightly over $200 million. That's about a 5.7% increase in the general fund. When you remove those one-time revenues that we don't reasonably expect to collect in future years, the operating revenue in the general fund is about $198.7 million. When we talk about expenditures, it's $430.8 million. That's about a 6.6% increase over the prior year. In the general fund, about $209.7 million is what the total expenses will be. And once again, pulling out the one-time expenses for things such as equipment or transfers to other funds for capital improvements, the operating budget is $198.6 million. Total staffing, the budget includes funding for 2,275.4 FTEs. That is up 31.5 FTEs from the prior year. And in the general fund, that's 1,351.15 FTEs. That's up 16 from the prior year. The ending fund balance in the general fund as of the end of 2020, if everything were to be collected and spent as budgeted, would be just over $50 million. That That includes a $9.3 million use of that fund balance. About $5.5 million of that is a transfer to the capital expenditure fund. We'll get a little bit more into the assessed value and property tax in a few slides. Right now, the county estimated mill levy for 2020 collections is 11.684 mills. That's down from 13.301 mills in 2019 as that temporary tax credit expands as the values have gone up about 16%, but the inflation plus new construction is only going up about 3%. The capital improvement program budget is $10.3 million. Looking at the overall revenue growth in the general fund, a sizable amount of that growth comes from the property tax increase of about $2.7 million. Motor vehicle related revenues up $1 million. Tax collection fees $1.1 million with that growth in taxable value. And then intergovernmental revenue collected from other organizations. Our cost allocation plan, a reimbursement of indirect costs from the federal government, as well as the law enforcement intergovernmental agreement for the sheriff's office and law enforcement services. A number of other things that combine to add about $4 million to the 2020 budget. And then on the flip side, development-related revenues are down about $500,000 as the level of activity is still at a high level. There were some rather large projects over the past year or two that brought in a decent amount of revenue that will not be experienced in 2020. In other funds, social services has increased allocations from the state and federal government for their programs of about $9.8 million. The increase in taxable value grew the revenue in both the Law Enforcement Authority Fund and the Development and Disability Fund for 2020, and then the grant fund, additional grant funds for community corrections, as well as a few other programs, increases that fund's revenue by $900,000. Looking at the trend in that revenue growth, you can see that after coming out of the recession in about 2014, 2015, revenue in the general fund has steadily grown through the current recommended budget. On the property tax, the total market value of the county is up 18.7% over 2019, or about $111 billion. The actual value of new construction, unfortunately, though, is down. It was $1.4 billion last year. It is $1.3 billion for 2020. That's a 9% decrease. When you look at that taxable value, it's $12.1 billion, up from $10.4 the prior year. And then the amount of value that is included in tax increment financing districts, that is up 16% to $166.2 million. Keeping in mind that our property tax is still limited by the provisions of Tabor, that provides the growth at the rate of inflation, estimated inflation for 2019, plus that rate of new construction compared to the total market value. That we're expecting to be 3.2%. Inflation just about 2%. New construction percentage about 1.2. That's how we get that 3.2. As a comparison, last year was 4.8%. We had about 1.5, 1.6% in new construction. And then the inflation rate was much higher at about almost 3%. We've had with the uncertain economy, that inflation rate has come down almost a full 1.5%. And that new construction rate, the increase in market appreciation across the entire county, means that $1.3 billion is less of a percent of the total value now than it was in a prior year. Was there a question from Commissioner Conti?
Yes, just while we're on this slide, Todd, thank you. I'm just wondering, the $166.2 million that you talk about in the TIF districts, and the fact that that is up 16% over what it was last year. How many more years will that continue? Basically, I guess I'm wondering, how much is the county losing? If that were at full value right now, do we know what we would be realizing?
At this point, that would probably be about $1.8 million. That's a guess. I can get you the exact amount.
Additional revenue?
Additional revenue,
okay.
Yeah. That value, and the length of time, those tax increment financing districts have a set time, but there's about 30 of them in Arapahoe County, all with different start dates.
Right.
So it's just something that's gonna be around for quite some time. It's just important to know how much is within those districts.
Right.
Because that reduces from the gross assessed that taxable value down to the net taxable value. Our property tax revenue is set on the net taxable value.
Thank you. So but your ballpark back of the napkin guesstimate would be about $1.4 million?
Yeah, about $1.5 million. We can get you an exact number.
Thank you. I do appreciate that.
Obviously, we get final certification numbers in December, so some of this data could change, but we're not expecting a significant change. Looking at this graphically depicted on that first chart, the orange bars are the actual value of the county. You can see the stair-step growth in that each assessment cycle. The main point on this first chart, that gray line is the value of new construction. The last time we had a year-over-year decrease in new construction was right before the recession. So kind of echoing some comments from Public Trustee Ryden, there are some signs out there in the economy that we've got some uncertain waters ahead. So this could be an indicator that we need to be mindful of what may happen over the next year or two budget-wise. Looking at the taxable value, you can see the orange bars grow, which are the assessed value, kind of exceed that gray line. The gray line is revenue. So as you have taxable value grow at double digits, and our TABOR growth allows us to only grow at sub 4%, that's how those orange bars get on top of that gray line. Looking at the mill levy estimates for 2020, you can see that county levy drops from the 13.3 to the 11.684. That temporary tax credit increases from about 2.6 mils up to 4.2 mils. For development of disability, the growth in assessed value grows that revenue from $10.5 million to over $12 million. And in the law enforcement authority, it goes from under $7 million to over $8 million. So that helps with funding some of the law enforcement needs in that part. Here's a quick depiction of what the county's mill levy looks like. If you keep in mind that our maximum levy since 1998 is at 15.821, you can see the mill levy has varied with the economy. Generally, the mill levy drops when you have a growing economy and increases when you have a declining economy with that temporary tax credit that has to be sort of put in there to make sure we don't exceed our TABOR limit. But when you look at revenues, you can see that the revenue growth has been pretty consistent, allowing us to adjust that temporary tax credit provides that kind of stability in revenue growth. We were asked to provide some information to the commissioners on where we stood in the metro area. I know reading the counties and the numbers on this chart will be difficult, but I'll just hit the high point. This is the mill levy comparison based on 2019. We obviously don't know what some of the other counties are doing for their 2020 mill levies yet. But you can see we're that second bar. So as far as mill levies go, we're the shortest one of the 7 metro area counties, and that's Adams, Arapahoe, Boulder, Broomfield, Denver, Douglas, and Jefferson in that order. When you look at the assessed value for each county, you can see that we are the second behind the city and county of Denver. But when you combine that lowest mill levy with the second highest assessed value, you get the 5th highest collection on property tax. So you can see that just about every county but Broomfield and Douglas exceeds us on property tax collections in 2019. Just to give you a perspective on what our mill levy looks like. Talking about the contents of the budget for 2020, obviously structurally balanced in that general fund budget, which means our ongoing expenses do not exceed our ongoing revenues, provides financial sustainability, shows our ability to financially manage our resources, and makes it so that we only use our ongoing revenues to pay our ongoing bills, and we're not dipping into our savings account to keep the lights on or to pay employee salaries. The 2020 general fund operating budget is structurally balanced. Right now, the operating surplus is $129,259 out of a total budget of about $199 million. You can see from this chart, the green part of the bar on the left shows the revenue, and on the right, the expenses. So you can see that very slim margin between operating revenues and expenses. The orange part of that bar chart shows the one-time uses or one-time revenues that are coming into the general fund in 2020. That one-time use of fund balance out of the general fund is $9.3 million. And when we look at that surplus and we compare it to other years, in 2019 we had a $2.1 million surplus, 2018 a $1.6 million surplus in an operating budget, and then you can see when you're coming out of that recession, some of the surpluses were much less and similar to what we have this year. Looking at the general fund as a whole, as I said, we've got $198.7 million in operating revenues, $198.6 million in operating expenses, leaving us with $129,000 surplus. That $9.3 million use of fund balance is made up of, we'll get to that in a moment, but election costs, one-time use of fund balance to transfer to the capital expenditure fund and some other equipment, leaving us with $50.4 million in the fund balance at the end of 2020. Looking at the trend in the operating budget over the past 5 years, you can see that it's generally increased since 2015 as we've had revenue growth and the expansion of the economy. The gray part of the bar in this chart shows you the one-time uses of fund balance and how they've kind of were non-existent in the recession, but have kind of returned as the revenue and the budget has permitted. The total compensation budget includes merit increases, market increases, benefit increases for all classes of employees in the county that are included in this 2020 budget. The merit salary increase is budgeted at 3.3% for all employees. That's a pool that's distributed by each department and office to employees based on their performance. That 3.3% translates into $4.2 million across all county funds and $2.3 million in the general fund. It was also 3.3% for that pool in 2019. Law enforcement step progressions are also budgeted. That's $543,000 in the county budget for 2020. And then market adjustments this year, Only the amount that's funded for those market adjustments that will bring those who fall below the bottom of the range up to the range. In 2019, we funded the movement of all the employees to that range to keep them on pace with market. But in the interim years, 2 or 3 years in between those large adjustments, it's only to bring up the folks that fall below the bottom of it. There's a number of other changes in total compensation. The health insurance increase was about 5.5%. That increase was split evenly between the employees and the county. That translates into about $770,000 in the 2020 budget. There was an increase in the sheriff's office specialty pay. Communication techs in the sheriff's office who work at the 911 call center are now moved to a STEP program rather than being on just a general pay grade system. And then there's also an increase to the retirement contribution, increasing both the employer and the employee contribution from 8.5 to 8.75%. That's a $380,000 impact on the 2020 budget. So look at this chart. You can see the growth in the total compensation as an added addition to each year's budget. You can see last year we made that large market increase. That green part of that bar in 2019 is quite large. In 2020, you can see when we're just moving up the people that fall below the range, that decreases the amount of compensation that we've included in the 2020 budget. Moving to what's included as far as recommended budget packages for 2020, a significant amount of the budget packages funded in the 2020 budget fall within the Sheriff's Office. The Detention Services Bureau, which is in charge of running the jail and court security, there's an addition of 7 FTEs related to the implementation of Senate Bill 19-191. That's about $621,000. That is in pursuit of the requirement to release inmates within 4 hours of their bond being posted. The increase to jail medical services, food services, and court security contracts are in total over $1.3 million in the budget. On flipping over to public safety, the increased attention to school safety has resulted in requests from the Sheriff's Office for an additional sergeant for SRO supervision. Currently, there is only 1 sergeant over the 13 or so SRO officers. This additional sergeant will help with that span of control. That's 1 FTE at about $213,000. That is not all salaries and benefits. That also includes a patrol vehicle, all the equipment that goes with the officer and the vehicle. This SRO for Cherry Creek Academy was another request that came in. A portion of this will be paid for by Cherry Creek Academy, about 50% of the salaries and benefits. Once again, $171,000 for the position. About $60,000 of it is just for one-time equipment. The replacement of laptops within each patrol vehicle out on the street is about $531,000. A lot of those patrol officers are under the contract with the City of Centennial. They will be reimbursing us for about $331,000 of that. And we are adding 3 patrol officers in the Law Enforcement Authority Fund for unincorporated patrol. The Clerk and Recorder's Office, the largest increase there, deals with the 2020 election costs. There is a presidential primary, a state primary, and a general election. So that $2.7 million is primary for printing and binding, postage, and those temporary election workers that come along with running those elections. In community resources, there is a judicial services pretrial officer. That is also related to Senate Bill 191 from 2019. That FTE costs about $80,000 salaries and benefits and equipment. And in the facilities and fleet management, the difficulty in hiring and keeping custodial staffing has resulted in the addition of 2 FTEs in that department as well. Information technology, a number of hardware assets need to be replaced that keep the network running. That's about $592,000 in the 2020 budget. Of that, about $400,000 is a one-time expense. There was also the addition of an additional software configuration administrator. That's 1 FTE at about $108,000. In public works and development, increased workload in building and the zoning divisions has resulted in 2 FTEs there, 1 for a building inspector, another for a zoning inspector. And then in the road and bridge fund, there were requests for increased pavement maintenance and large equipment replacement. Due to the financial situation of the road and bridge fund, some of those requests had to be curtailed, but we're still able to fit in some of the equipment and some of the pavement maintenance for 2019. And then in the open spaces department, an open space planner was requested to help them with the backlog of some of their activities over the next few years. That's budgeted at 1 FTE and about $96,000. Other requests, landfill maintenance, tax incentive payments for personal property that have been issued to businesses within Arapahoe County. Those are increasing over time, so we need another $145,000 there. Human resources that requested additional compliance training funding. And then in our human services department, there was the funding of about 11.5 positions, 8 of those in the child and community support services program, 2.5 positions in the legal division, and 1 of them in the human services finance division. There was also increases in not only the child welfare allocation and the spending authority that goes along with that, but also the maintenance of effort for the Colorado Work Program as well. Yes, Commissioner.
Just wondering if you could give us the approximate on some of these. I know, like the open space, and I'm so glad I can ask you questions so you can take a little break there. The open space department, that is coming out of the open space budget specifically, not the general fund, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of those requests I just went over are the general fund. I should have informed you that the open space position is coming from the open space sales tax fund.
Right, and then also the human services.
Those are coming from the social services fund, where we provide about 20% or so of the funding there through the property tax and specific ownership tax, and the remainder of that comes from allocations from the state and federal.
Right. Just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. That's not 100% coming out of our general fund. That is something that is passed through dollars largely. Thank you.
We do have a number of budget items that are included in the county budget that are shared with other counties, the district attorney's office, as well as Tri-County Health. There were a number of requests that came from the district attorney's office. There's a population adjustment and a salary and benefit adjustment for their employees that are included in this 2020 recommended budget. There were a number of other staffing and operating expense requests that are not included in the recommended budget, and the respective boards of county commissioners are continuing to discuss those. For Tri-County Health, once again, a population adjustment. That's how we break down the cost for the Tri-County Health Department as well as the DA. The per capita increase there is $173,000 netted against the population decrease. It comes to about $145,000. As I said, additional discussions with the partner counties are ongoing. When you look at our staffing, you can see the 31 FTEs adds to our 2019 total to get us from 2243 up to the 2275. And then this is not readable on this format, but it goes over all the positions that are included in the 2020 budget. What you'll see on here is that there are 16 positions included in the general fund. Half of those, or actually more than half of those, in the sheriff's office. There's 11.5 positions in the social services fund, 3 positions in the law enforcement authority fund for patrol, and that position in the open spaces sales tax fund. These were all the positions, the 58.25 positions that were requested from a variety of departments and offices, including the clerk and recorder's office and the sheriff's office, as well as human services, that we were not able to fund in the 2020 budget. Coming down the home stretch. Capital Improvement Program. There's 10.3 budgeted for 2020. That was reduced from a $14.6 million request. The main reason that was reduced was to stay above that $50 million fund balance total. When you look at what is included in that 2020 Capital Improvement Program budget, $3 million for the ILF corridor improvements. There's another $1.8 million for the addition of a large courtroom in Courthouse 2, as we're expecting an additional judicial officer during 2020. And then $1.4 million for the E470 ramp, or the interchange where E470 meets Quincy Avenue. A number of other projects are included in there: bomb vehicle for the sheriff's office, body scanners for public safety facilities. The full detail is available in the 2020 recommended budget. You can see that in the 2020 budget, it's the second bar on that chart. As you look ahead to 2021 through 2024, the needs for the capital program are larger than they have been over the past couple of years. We will have to figure out ways to either mitigate that by deferring projects or providing additional funding. And when you look at where the revenue for the capital plan comes from, the purple part of this chart shows that it comes from property tax, but the blue part is a transfer from the general fund. And that transfer from the general fund is comprised of money that has not been spent in a prior year that falls into fund balance. We pick that money back up and use it for capital improvements. This chart here depicts where we started with our requested budget that would have resulted in a $7 million operating deficit and a $21 million use of fund balance, and how we got to today where we're at $129,000 surplus and a $9 million use of fund balance, keeping that fund balance above $50 million. But obviously, as we pointed out, there were a number of requests that could not be funded to get to that point. In other funds, the Social Services Fund is running a bit of a deficit as their program expenses have increased. We're going to be using some fund balance to meet our county match on some of those programs. The revenue increase in the Law Enforcement Authority Fund has provided additional funding so we could add those 3 officers to that fund. The Road and Bridge Fund is continuing a spend down of their fund balance 2020. The fund balance still remains above the policy reserve, but the county will have to look at mitigating factors for 2021 and beyond for that fund. Capital Expenditure Fund can only fund what we give it at $10.4 million. Recreation District is balanced, and then the Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Public Improvement District only pays the debt of that public improvement district, and therefore the revenue is set to pay that debt. Other budgeted funds, the Development Disability Fund, as I said before, had an increase due to the increased taxable value. The Arapahoe County Fair Fund, there was a good fair this year. They're increasing the anticipated revenues and expenses for the 2020 fair. And then the Infrastructure Fund, $5.5 million is allocated to road expansion and construction projects in 2020. The key topics for discussion before the budget can be adopted, we need to resolve those third-party budget requests with our colleague counties. If there are any budget package recommendations this board would like to change or revise, because the operating surplus is so small, we can't add much without having to take stuff out. There's also the deferred projects from the capital plan. Those didn't go away. They just moved to 2021. We'll have to deal with that. And then, as I said earlier, if there is a passage of Initiative 1A, we will have to revise this budget to include that revenue and the expenses for the purposes that were outlined in the ballot initiative. So with that, today is the public hearing. There'll be another study session to review this budget on November 19th. At least that's what we have scheduled at this point. And then we will meet again on December 10th here in the public hearing to adopt the budget and certify the mill levies. So with that, thank you to everybody who participated in the budget. I know I went very fast, so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time. With that.
Questions for Mr. Weaver? Mr. Holland.
Todd, first of all, I want to thank you and the tremendous staff effort that goes into this very complicated and sometimes ununderstandable from this side of the bench process. What I do want to point out is you mentioned our shared responsibility with certain departments and for example, the 18th Judicial District and Tri-County Health. But also an issue that I think is important to reflect for the record is that many of the projects in our Capital Improvement Fund and road and bridges, and specifically the Quincy expansion, is a result of collaboration between a variety of agencies and governmental entities. That also held true last year with the work that we did on the 6th Avenue extension into the E470 exchange. So could you just briefly comment on that for the record?
Yeah, at least in the Olive Avenue corridor, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I want to say that project is in the $20 million range, and our portion of that is probably in the $6 or $7 million range. So we are leveraging a lot of funds from state and federal highway monies. The same goes with the 470 and Quincy interchange. I want to say our contribution to that project is in the $4 to $5 million range, but the total project is significantly larger than that. So what we've seen in this budget is only Arapahoe County's responsibility for that project. There will be reimbursements from other organizations for their contributions to that project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Sharp.
I think one of the things we need to keep an eye on is the Senate Bill 19191, because that increased our FTE by 8, and we are working hard with our legislators because we feel that's an unfunded mandate and from the state. So I think we need to be really careful and cautious about hiring individuals that if that changes in legislation in 2020, those individuals may not be necessary. So since it's 8 FTE to comply, I think that's an area I think we just need to be really cautious about spending the money in advance and saying, I know we need to comply, but we need to see how the legislature handles this right out of the gate in January. Hopefully they'll look at it quickly. Thank you.
Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, as legislative liaison, I have been in contact with several of the sponsoring legislators of Senate Bill 191, just for the public knowledge, and have their assurances, including the prime sponsor of that bill, Mr. Representative Bridges, that they will work to amend that bill so that it will decrease the county's need for the additional FTE that is mandating. Or give us some sort of an exemption or waiver or something that we can apply for or something to this effect. So he is encouraging us to, and I quote, keep your powder dry, and you might want to hold on hiring of those, and they will work with us in the next year. So just want to put that on the record. Thank you.
Other questions, comments from commissioners? Thank you very much, Mr. Weaver. This is a public hearing, so we will open this up for public comment. There was a sign-in sheet at the door. No one did sign up to speak about that, but open public hearing at this time. Are there any citizens that would like to address the Board of County Commissioners on the 2020 budget? Seeing none, we're going to consider leaving this public hearing open between now and December 10th. That's a date certain. So during that time frame, any citizens here in person or watching us over the internet can submit comments about the 2020 budget up until that time. And again, we will consider that. Is that correct? Okay. Any other discussion? If not, I would consider a motion. Or I would read the motion myself, if whoever. I'll go ahead and read it. I move to continue the public hearing for the 2020 recommended budgets for Arapahoe County, the Arapahoe Law Enforcement Authority, and the Arapahoe County Recreation District, and acting as the ex officio board of the Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Public Improvement District, to continue the public hearing for the 2020 recommended budgets for the Arapahoe County Water and Wastewater Public Improvement District until December 10th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m., at which time the Board of County Commissioners shall consider whether to adopt the 2020 budgets and take further action as required by law.
A second.
Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Sharp. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you all very much, and I'll echo the comments of Commissioner Holland that we know how hard it is to put together a budget, and with all of the other things that we've had going on, there have been a lot of hard questions posed to our finance department over the last 10 months, and if not more. And so we really appreciate all your hard work in doing that. Next item on the public hearing agenda is item number 7. Let me just make sure, 7C. This is case number PF 19-001, the Polidora 14 final plat. This was continued from October 15th. It is a public hearing. Our presenter this morning is going to be, hang on just a minute, Bill Skinner, Senior Planner, Public Works and Development. Our attorney on this matter is Robert Hill, Senior Assistant County Attorney. Mr. Hill, would you set the foundation, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This application for a subdivision final plat has been noticed in accordance with Land Development Code and state requirements. It was originally noticed for September 24th, at which time the hearing was commenced. That hearing was then continued to October 15th, and on October 15th it was again continued until today. No testimony or anything occurred on the October 15th, so it was just continued straight to today. The board, the original noticing carries forward. The board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Good morning, Mr. Skinner.
Morning, Commissioners. So today we have PF 19-001, also known as Polidora filing number 14 final plat. Thrive Home Builders is proposing a plat that subdivides 2.27 acres located at 9437 South Colorado into lots for 16 paired homes and tracts for supporting infrastructure. The staff finds that the plat application complies with the 5 criteria set in the Land Development Code. They've proven availability of water and sewer. There's no concerns with unstable soils or other geological issues. It complies with the underlying zoning established initially with the La Teresa plat, or La Teresa preliminary development plan approved by the board in the rest of the county in 2003. It further complies with the second step in that PUD process, the Highline East specific development plan approved by the Planning Commission, having been initially heard, continued to address concerns, and then unanimously approved by the Planning Commission within the last few months. This appeared at the board originally on October 25th, and as Attorney Hill said, came back on the 15th and now is back a third time today on the 29th. The hearing on the 24th, there were some concerns raised. Our new PUD process is a little different, and we understand that the commissioners didn't get to see a site plan, which is what the plat being heard will provide lots and tracts for. That can be a little confusing. We have asked the applicant to come back and show you their site plan and some details that were presented to the Planning Commission for the specific development plan that they have approved. Largely as information, but we would like to provide some comfort for you before you go approving a bunch of ambiguous boxes and lines on a plat. So to that end, I'd like to have the applicant come up and provide that informational presentation.
Before that happens, I have one question. Can you remind us what the Planning Commission recommendation was?
Planning Commission doesn't see final plat.
Okay.
So they come directly to you.
What you had said then. Okay.
Oh, I can provide the staff recommendation. We find that it meets those 5 criteria, so staff recommends approval based on that.
Okay. Any questions for staff before we have the applicant come forward? Thank you, Mr. Skinner, and don't go far.
I will not.
All right. So the applicant is welcome to come forward, and if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Brody Smith. I work for Thrive Home Builders. Our address is 1875 Lawrence Street, Suite 900, Denver, Colorado. As Bill said, we are here today to give you just a little bit more background information. We thought we would start first, which is telling you a little bit about who we are. Thrive has been around for the past 25 years or so, founded by our CEO, Gene Myers, the guy you see up on the screen there. And we are a builder who, sort of the 3 legs of our company are being efficient, healthy, and local. And so we really pride ourselves on building some of the most efficient homes in the Denver metro area in Colorado, and also some of the healthiest. You can see up on the screen there a number of awards that we've received over the years. We won't put that up there to brag or to boast. But to demonstrate to you how serious we are about the homes that we build. We strive to build the best homes that we can, and we don't rely, on patting ourselves on the back and saying that we've done a good job, but on third-party people to verify that. Some of the names up there you might recognize: the U.S. Green Building Council, who's in charge of the LEED program, the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program, the National Housing Quality Award, the EPA Indoor Air Plus program, as well as the Energy Star certification program. We've received certifications and awards from all those people on a number of our homes. So as I mentioned, one of the legs of the stool of our company is to be efficient. We've been building energy efficient houses for quite a while. We've been building greenhouses long before it was exciting or cool to be green. It's always been a part of our mission. And so we always build our houses to a higher standard. Of course, every builder has to build to the minimum building code, but our minimum building code is the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program. So we go above and beyond what other builders typically put into their homes. That means we're constantly building with innovation. We strive and are constantly looking for ways to make our homes more efficient. Some of the ways we've done that in the past is through our double 2x4 wall system, which creates an extremely energy efficient envelope. We look to build environmental integrity, and so every house that we build not only meets the Department of Energy's Zero Energy Ready Home program, but it also meets the LEED for Homes certified program, and every home we build receives that certification. In addition to all of that, all of our homes include Energy Star certified products as well as WaterSense certified products to make sure that we are putting the very best that we can into our houses so they're both efficient in their energy use and also in their water use.
We have one question right up front.
Sure.
Wouldn't mind. Commissioner Conti.
Yes, while we're on this, just a clarification question. When you talk about double, or back a slide, oh, no, right here. I'm sorry, double 2x4 wall system. Is that in effect a 2x8? Or?
So essentially what it is it makes a 9-inch thick wall. So you have a 2x4 stud on this side and a 2x4 stud on this side filled with insulation. And so as you can imagine, that helps keep your house extremely energy efficient. The studs are staggered because what happens is you have when they're lined up, that creates a thermal bridge, essentially allowing cold air or warm air from the outside to penetrate into your home. So by staggering those studs, you're able to create a tighter envelope for the house.
Thank you.
Some of the other things that we concentrate on is not just energy efficiency, but also the health of the home. There's been a lot of studies done about how the indoor air quality is a leading factor for people's health. And so a while back, the EPA came up with a program called the Indoor Air Plus certification. We adopted that, and we meet all of their standards. So that means using the type of paint in your house that has lower emissions, even the type of carpet. I think anyone who's put new carpet into their house knows when you walk in, you get that new carpet smell. It's not good for you. It's full of formaldehyde, and so we try and put as much product as we can into our house that avoids anything that's going to be bad for the air that you breathe. And so again, every house that we build meets the EPA's Indoor Air Plus certification program, whether it's an income qualified house or $1 million home. One of the other things that we do to help keep our homeowners healthy is to build an active radon system. Here in Colorado, we have a lot of radon in our soils, just naturally occurring. And so we add that active radon system to every home as well. And then we're constantly, again, just trying to look for different products that can lead to healthier homes. One of the products we've used in the past is the Certainteed Air Renew Drywall. And that is a product that actually sort of sucks the formaldehyde out of the air. And then one other thing to know is actually just a couple of weeks ago, the EPA awarded us their Indoor Air Plus Certification Leader of the Year across the country because of the number of houses that we've built that have met their program for the past year. We've built all over the Denver metro region. These are some of the most recent communities that we've built. So everywhere from downtown Superior all the way down to Lone Tree, Wheat Ridge, over to Stapleton, and everything in between. So we've built all over the place. We're a truly local builder. Our offices are right in downtown Denver. We live here. We work here. We are not a big corporate entity that has, offices in California or Texas or anything like that. We're a Colorado builder. We're proud of that, and we try our best to partner with other local companies. There's a lot of trades that go into building our homes. For everything from electricians to plumbers to framers, and we try to partner with companies that are local to the Denver metro region. Moving on, just to talk a little more specifically about this actual site. For those of you who aren't familiar with this area, it's located just north of Parker Road, which you can see kind of cutting through diagonally there between Colorado and Mexico Avenues. Dayton Street is the next major street over to the east, and then Beeler Street to the west. You can see just some of the uses that are in this area. Of course, there's some single-family detached homes. There's also some open space. You can see the green line down there to the south is the Highline Canal Trail. Further, there are some duplexes in this area directly north of the site. And then also just about a block up and a block over, a recently completed development by KB Homes a few years ago. And then everything in red you can see is either apartments, townhomes, or some other commercial use. So there's quite a bit of a mix in this area. Further, there's a little bit of industrial area right there along Jewel Avenue, some pretty big power lines running through there, and then a large parking area also along Mexico. We have done some neighborhood outreach. We've met with the 4 Square Mile Development Committee last December, with the neighborhood as a whole in February. After that meeting, went with a couple of adjacent neighbors, directly adjacent to the site in our offices. We've met with other neighbors out on the site here in July, and then there's been multiple email exchanges with neighbors in between during this whole process. To look at one of the questions was about fire access last time. This is just an exhibit that shows that we had provided to the fire department that they approved. That shows how the fire truck moves through the site, how it's able to access everything. You can see the lines there in yellow, in red, showing the no parking areas as well. One of the other issues that had come up last time we were here was the sightline triangles. I'd actually just like to invite our engineer up here to explain this, just because it's a little technical and he can explain it better than I can, so we'll invite him up.
Welcome. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Morning, Board. My name's Evan Rumney. I'm with Redland. Its address is 1500 West Canal Court, Littleton, Colorado, 80120. So what you're looking at here is you're looking at the access points to the Highline East project, one on East Mexico, one on East Colorado Ave. The dashed lines here represent an AASHTO site distance line. That is a line that follows the AASHTO Green Book standards. It is based on posted speed, design speed, and intersection geometry.
Questions? Yeah. Commissioner Jackson.
So, I don't see it perfectly from where I am. I might look over here, but nevertheless, could you, for a lay person, just kind of explain what all that meant?
Yeah.
Sorry, just translate for me. Thank you.
Where these dashed lines are coming to a point here in the access points, the South Private Drive and the North Private Drive, that would be where.
Those little triangles?
Yeah. The dashed lines there. So those dashed lines are actually your site distance lines. And what they're doing is they're measuring out to a point at the center line along Colorado Ave and along Mexico Ave. And in this instance, Mexico and Colorado are posted at 30 miles per hour. This is designed to 35 miles per hour, so we built in a little bit more factor of safety. But what it basically does is it's extending a distance for if the car was to make a left turn. That site distance, I believe, in this case is 335 feet that it's looking out onto Mexico, and if it was to make a right turn, it'd be looking out, I believe it's 320 feet the other direction.
And so that's adequate for driving and being able to see who's coming as I make a left or a right turn.
Yeah, that is correct. Like I said, it's posted at 30, and these are designed for a 35.
And if somebody's speeding, then we don't know. So you need to be cautious when you leave that. So is there going to be like a sign or something that says, limited sight distance or stop here or something?
There's a stop sign exiting onto Colorado Ave and Mexico Ave.
Okay.
We don't necessarily have a limited sight distance because we are actually exceeding the AASHTO requirements. It's 30 mile per hour posted on Mexico and Colorado, and these have been designed for 35 miles per hour.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions for engineering? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And continue with your presentation.
And then just one quick thing to note here. These do cross over onto the adjacent, the sightline triangles you can see cross over onto adjacent property boundaries. And we're actively working with those neighbors to get an agreement that says that nothing will obstruct those in perpetuity. And so we're working on that with them. Of course, without any sort of certainty, people are probably not going to want to sign anything. And so after this hearing, we'll continue to work on that. And as part of the administrative site plan, we wouldn't be able to get approval without having those agreements in place.
Commissioner Sharp, question.
One of the things that I saw in one of the letters or emails was if somebody comes in there, how do they back up and how? So tell me how wide, because I've seen some of these similar kinds of developments and where there's a garage and that kind of thing, and there is adequate room to turn around. But can you tell me how that works with this development?
Sure. I mean, what we have shown meets the county standard for a private drive. So it's a 30-foot flow line to flow line. So essentially from the edge of the inside part of the curb to the other edge of the inside part of the curb. And it is, we have a turnaround study that was submitted to the county that shows the car is able to do a 3-point turn if they were in there and needed to turn around.
Okay.
Just to give you an idea about looking a little bit closer into the site about some of the existing conditions there. So to the east, you can see the apartment community, those larger buildings. There's also one over to the west, and then the single-family homes that sort of surround. On the northeast corner, there's a large detention pond there that is serving that apartment community to the east. And then you can see to the west just the neighbors of the single-family detached houses. You can also see that the previous owner had a pretty large collection of semi-trailers that he kept on the property. When we acquired it after he essentially abandoned that property when we purchased the land. And so once we were legally able to move those items, we moved them off of the property, and so they're no longer there. Just to give you a little closer look at that as well. So what we're proposing, as Bill had mentioned, is just 16 paired homes. Those homes all front onto large green courts, and then you have some rain gardens as well. We exceed the amount of open space that's required by the zoning. We also exceed the amount of parking that is required by the zoning. You can see in the middle there, again, how the fire department is able to navigate through the site. One of the other things that had come up and is probably particularly poignant on today is snow storage and where that happens. So you can see, hopefully it might be a little bit hard, but at the end of each of these private drives, we've got a 5-foot sort of buffer zone here that would be a rock cobble or a rock mulch, and that's where the snow would be able to be piled up if it needed to on days like today. Also, that allows it to do is just to give you better, it's obviously want to get the snow off of the road, and by placing it there allows it to not just empty into the storm drainage system, but to percolate through the ground to be filtered before it enters back into the storm area.
One question, Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. So can you tell me more about that old gray strip in the middle? Are people able to drive on it, or is it only for emergency vehicles only? And I think there was some discussion about that last time, about who can go there and how does that all work? Are people going to make that little S and, make a shortcut? Or is it private drive kind of thing marked? Or how does that whole thing work?
So that is a emergency access area. We've designated it as such. We had originally proposed to the fire department. Let me back up just a little bit. When we first came into the county, that little middle area did not exist. We didn't want to put it there, and the fire department essentially said that we needed to create a place for them to be able to turn around because our private drive had become too long. When we applied their standards to the turnaround to each side, they essentially connected, which is why you have that S-shaped drive there. So when they asked us to do that, we wanted to put up some collapsible bollards. The fire department told us no. So what we've done is we've tried to designate that area as best as we can as an emergency access area. We've done that by, at the end of each of these private drives, there is a 4-inch mountable curb. You can see also that it's sort of designated as a different type in the color there. The drives would be asphalt, whereas that emergency access area would be concrete. There'll be emergency access area signs posted. And so we've done what we can, without putting up a barrier to restrict access to that site.
So there'll be like a little curb, which, if I have a nice car, I might not want to go over it because...
Yeah, you might have seen, there's a lot of like rollover sidewalks, I think, in different parts of Denver that you may have seen. It's essentially that.
But it's more than a speed bump.
Yes.
Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just had a question when you were talking about the snow that could be piled up. I'm looking at, obviously, our road, if you will, with the with the dotted line that's along the driveways, on the top of this drawing. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, so you were talking about, obviously these are the roads where the snow would be cleared. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about that entire row of snow coming down and being shoveled into what is then green with the trees?
Sure, and there, as I mentioned, this sort of area right here is where you have that rock cobble mulch. That's 5 feet wide, and then if it's spilled over into the green area as well, depending on how much snow there is.
I was going to say, on a day like today, I think that
it'd certainly be quite a bit, but yes. Better to put it there than to have it on the road.
Well, oh yeah, and I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking about like snows happening like what we've got happening outside today, and with the totals that they're talking about with this system, and thinking, yeah, are they going to have to go through the trees or into the? Yeah.
I don't know that we've done that exercise to look at volume.
Like 5 feet would not be nearly adequate for 8 inches times I don't know how many feet long that is, but.
If they needed to go into the green area, they certainly could. I think that's always a problem no matter where you live. If you've got excess snow, where do you put it?
Right. And so that's what but that is the plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
To just give you, we have some renderings as well, just to give you a better idea of what the space will look like. So this is looking north from the southern section. You can see we've got 2 different styles of buildings there, sort of a prairie house style and then also a contemporary farmhouse. You can see how that green space lives, also how it is along the edge there, sort of creating a buffer with both a 6-foot privacy fence and also some landscaping. Just another look at that area, giving you a little bit of what the rain gardens look like. And then looking in more detail at the architecture. This was working with specifically the 4 Square Mile development group and getting their feedback and input and adding some masonry and everything onto that home. And then again with the Prairie House as well. And if you have any additional questions, we're happy to answer those.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your presentation. Oh, wait 1 minute.
I don't really have a question, but I appreciate seeing this. It helps me. I didn't have this perspective last time, so I appreciate, you taking us through this and to be able to see it and answer specifically some of the questions that we had in relationship to looking at distances and things like that. So.
And we apologize for not having a presentation last time. I know this is a new process in the county, and so we had asked staff, do we need one? They said, no, you'll be fine. It's just a plat. And so we apologize for not having it here last time. We would have otherwise.
And I think our process is, as we talked about, is a little confusing because we don't see all of this, but the Planning Commission does. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so I do have a sign-in sheet for those that did apply to speak. I'll be calling your name. We have some rules. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. We'll ask you to come forward, state your name and address for the record, because sometimes on the sign-in sheet it's not legible. So we'll ask you to make sure that we verify your address. And we have some lights up here in front of us, a yellow light and a red light. The yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds left to speak, and the red light coming on means you've used all of your 3 minutes, and we ask you to wrap up at that time. So even if you did get in late and were not able to sign up to speak, we'll be asking for any additional citizen comments at that time. The first one on my list, it looks like it's Tim Betts. Beam? Can you spell your last name for me? H-M. Got it.
And I live across the street from this development.
And your address?
At 9460 East Colorado Avenue. Fun. This is all working today.
Yes.
All right. So
thank you very much.
It's nice that you guys got to see his pictures and his ideas and everything that are going in to this small piece of property. The fact that they're putting it right in the middle of the neighborhood is still odd, still strange, and doesn't really work very well for anyone. I basically want to talk about some of the things he didn't give you the information about. I can't believe that I'm here talking about this again for 15 years, that we still are dealing with this piece of property like this. But anyway, we want a good development. They present that as a wonderful development. I'm a builder, engineer, been doing this all my life. All the awards and stuff, nice, great. We all have that if we're in the business. We want that. We want marketing. Okay, no big deal. But some of the concerns we need to talk about are the safety issues. Now, they took the drawings away so you can't see those, but hopefully you have a good idea of what was there. Strangely enough, I thought the design was even different on the curb, but it's actually bigger than what the plans that you guys should have got originally. So that makes even a harder turnaround space at the end. And like you had brought up Kathleen, you brought up the idea that it's hard to push snow. Well, you got to push snow over the curb. That's going to be a maintenance thing. It's not a good thing. So they didn't show you all the car spaces parked on that street. They had single car parking between the buildings. I think they had 4 originally. Then everybody had asked for more parking. They added parking on the streets, the travel areas there. Let's do the math on that. The street's 30 feet wide with the curb. They added parking spaces down both sides on the wrong side of the street. So you basically have to go in, turn around to park so you can get out of your car. Otherwise, you're getting into those pretty trees and flowers and everything they showed you, which are supposed to be in that 5-foot space from the street to the property line. So we have a 30-foot street. We put 9-foot parking space in there, 9 by 18. Now what do we have? We have a 21-foot street. I talked to the fire department because after speaking with you guys and asking some of the questions, I wanted to know what they really thought. Let me make this clear to you, I talked to Jeff. Talked to him for quite a while. Actually, I talked to everybody involved with that. It wasn't just Jeff, but it's South Metro Fire Department that had concerns about this. He wanted to have a 23 plus space. The minimum they can drive down with some certainty of safety is 20 feet. The street minus the parking space is 21 feet. So 21 feet in a car anywhere, there's nowhere to turn around, there's nowhere to do anything. You're backing up that space. I asked him, I said, this curbing, is this going to be adequate? He goes, we're not really concerned with safety, we're concerned with access. So for us, we can get in there, and safety being on this street, actually. So we can get in there, we can drive through.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up as soon as you can. The red lights come on.
All right, good. Well, I'm representing the whole neighborhood, so I need to be here for them. I'll take someone else's name if we need to do that. But anyway, he said to me that is not a safe situation to back up. He also told me that he had requested that they put in something to make it so it's not a through street, gates, chain. They had a whole list of things he told them to do. They never came back with him on any of that, so none of that got pushed forward. So basically, we got a curb that any SUV can drive over.
Thank you, Mr.
It's a
Bean.
street.
Next speaker.
So can I just finish this?
Sorry.
I drove all the way over here to do this, and I need to finish.
There's a lot of people that will probably.
There's
be
4 more people that made it here to help you with this. I think it's rude that you're not letting me speak when I'm the representative for the Homeowners Association, and this project is too big for this area. You all know that.
We sometimes do accept requests for additional time.
Thank you. I'm sorry to bother you with this. I hope you guys make the right decisions. It's a shame that we're even here doing this and that you're letting it go this far. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bean. The next speaker that we have signed up is Owen Bunker. If you'll come forward and confirm your name and address for me, if you would, please. And the lights are right up here in the front.
Okay.
And the yellow light will come on when you have 30 seconds left, and the red light will come on when you've used your 3 minutes.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Owen Bunker, pardon me, at 9390 East Mexico Avenue. I border 1/4 of the project on the northwest side. And just to start, I wasn't going to put this time in, but for what it's worth, I would like to ask that we have a little more time because I believe the developer has pretty much unlimited time to discuss the project and sell it. And when I watched, a lot of this was sales for the project, marketing of it and showing the quality construction, which I don't deny. I appreciate that part of it. My objection doesn't have to do with the quality of their construction of the homes. It has to do with what it's doing to my yard, what it's doing to my neighborhood. In 2006, I bought this property. Before I bought it, however, I saw the lot next door, so I went to the county, to planning, and asked what the plans were. They brought out the plot plans and showed me what had been approved, but they also explained at the time that that plot plan for the gentleman Ronnie had been approved, but if he does not develop it, then that zoning will never be accepted again. They will not allow high-density multifamily housing there. I didn't get it in writing, and I didn't know I had to. I just remember the lady's name, Tammy. I made a couple of trips to the building department before I made my offer on the property. In fact, before I raised my offer on the property. She had said there's not a possible way he could build on the property because he doesn't have the money and it won't happen. But I accepted that was my risk if he came forward. But she said without doubt, if he doesn't, they will not develop the property. So that's where I moved. I'm a single father. I have my daughter there. She can play in the backyard. I put her out there with my dog. There's not a lot of concern. However, if this goes through, which is contrary to what I expected when I purchased it and what I was told, I don't know that I want my daughter playing in the backyard with 8 homes next door, looking over into my fence. Now, there will be a 6-foot fence, and I appreciate that they agreed to extend it down my property line. But these are 2-story units, and I don't know who's going to be there or who will be renting these units after investors buy them or the homeowners decide to rent them out. Right now, I have a lot of privacy, and it's why I went there, but I will lose that if this is developed. I would just like to make a mention also, and I don't have a personal problem with anyone at Thrive Builders. Anyone I've met at these hearings has been nice. However, they are local, and they do say a lot about being local builders and living here, but none of them live in my neighborhood. None of them are my neighbors, and as soon as the project is gone, they will be gone as well. They have not yet reached out to me a single time to have a conversation or to address any of my objections. They did ask for access to my property once, so I granted that so they could do their plot plans. I don't have a problem working with them there, but they are going to ruin my home. I'm concerned about the value of my property, what will happen there. I don't know that I want 8 families looking into my backyard that I currently have that's private. I am worried about what it's going to do to the value of my property. The county is currently assessing the value of the property, but none of the comparables are right where I'm at. They're all on the other side of Mexico Avenue. Yet they're proposing building these right next door, which will very much limit it. But more than anything, it will limit the place I chose to build my home. I rebuilt it myself over a 5-year period. I'm still...
You wrap up when you can.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Bunker. Next speaker that signed up to speak is Penny Bem. Pam? And I believe that's the same address, 9460 East Colorado Avenue?
Correct.
Excellent. Good morning.
Pam Beam.
Beam, sorry.
Easy. I sent you an email because I didn't think we were going to be here. Thanks to Mother Nature, we are. So those main concerns in the email were that it doesn't fit in with the neighborhood. Just the way our neighbors all are. The second one was safety. The safety of, thank you. The safety of the traffic flow backing in and out. On his thing, they didn't have measurements, but from the center of that lot to the road is 300 feet, which is a football field. It's a long ways to try to back out. Cars can turn around. I don't see how UPS, Amazon trucks, all of that will be able to turn around, or a trash truck. So that's the safety, some of the safety concerns, just the general congestion in the neighborhood of the traffic, parking, all of that. A few of my new concerns, I looked over the agenda that was on the website for today. I'm shocked at the quality of the drawings and the graphics. With today's technology, I kept trying to zoom in to see numbers or measurements and all of that on the drawings. You can't see them. That was ridiculous. I also am wondering if the fire department has been revisited since the additional parking was added. I know that their drawing shows the two sections where the truck can swing in and out. And there just is some quality of the drawings. Things are mislabeled east to west. There's in the goals on page 3 of the plan, it said that before a final development plan had to be, this was in 2002, a final development plan had to be go through before the PDP could occur. But the final development plan never went through. So did it ever actually do that final step that gives it the technicality that it could be from 2002 passed on till now, 16 years later, however many. One of the goals is limit higher density. On that, that's on page 5, the higher density. It says it's within the limits. It's higher than it should be, but it's within. So that seems like a gray zone. The other thing is limit new residential. And that seems within the gray zone too, because it's in the middle of the neighborhood. It's not on the outskirts like the goals and everything say. So even your own policies are met, but not really. It doesn't seem like a black and white. That's why we have hue. If it was just a black and white situation, there'd be check boxes, okay? All the boxes, yes or no, pass or fail. So we're asking for your compassion, understanding, and investigation to look into those things. So that's all I ask, and we ask that it get denied. I'm sure there'll be beautiful homes. That's not the problem. It's that it doesn't fit there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And there were some questions. We have one additional speaker that signed up to speak, but I want Mr. Skinner, I think he was taking some notes about those questions, so we may be asking you to address those after we hear the last signed up speaker and anybody else. Next speaker is Keith Hamburger. And if you would state your name and address for the record. And again, we have some lights up here in the front. Yellow at 30 seconds, and the red means you need to wrap up.
Thanks, Jeff. Keith Hamburger, thanks for having me coming down here and offer our input. We appreciate it when you guys come and listen to what us neighbors say. The public hearings are really a big part of this project, and we want to be the public, and we want to be telling you what it is that we see. Every good story starts at the beginning. The parcel was originally subdivided by a convicted felon while he was stealing from his own customers. He operated a bait and switch program for his moving business. You saw the semi-truck trailers that used to be on the parcel. Ran a bait and switch company for his moving business. Ronnie kept semi-truck trailers on his 2-acre parcel where he stored customers' stolen goods. My neighbor was on the news for showing up for delivery and demanding 2 to 3 times what his original contract price was. That doesn't have a lot to do with this particular parcel, but it also sets the tone for what the former owner who originally subdivided this land was thinking while he was in the process of this subdivision. He did them both at the same time. While he was creating this subdivision that became approved, he was ripping off his customers. So it needs to be said that that was what a state of mind was. The neighbors objected in 2002 when Ronnie originally tried to do this subdivision. It was delayed until 2003. It's a very contentious meeting while the convicted felon laughed at us neighbors. So the person that originally did this it was a very difficult period of time. It was so bad the neighbors band together and raised awareness with the county to establish a density plan. The board we hope for this board to regard the previous board's recommendations, intentions, and guidance when they set up this county meeting for us neighbors to have an impact on what our neighborhood's going to be. Ronnie's parcel is clearly within the 1 to 2 DU area as designated by the citizen panel that I happened to be on. That happened back about a decade and a half ago. This plan is not the original plan from a decade and a half ago. It's more of the canyon effect, which the previous planning commission has said that they don't want canyon effect properties. Referring to Dayton and Florida for the DU is contrary to our street. Our street is houses mostly. Dayton, Florida is all high density. There is a project 300 feet that's to the west of this parcel that's being developed right now, 2 acres, that was going to 5 houses. That project did not receive negative feedback from neighbors, so 5 houses on 2 acres is good. 16 duplexes on 2 acres is bad. Everybody's grabbing onto the few parking spaces as the issue, but the real issue is density. Every once in a while, the government helps the citizens. When the federal government stepped in for Ronnie's former customers, that was a beautiful example of the government helping. We're hoping for you folks to help us neighbors in keeping our neighborhood intact. I remember when the planning and zoning, Tammy King, the head of the planning and zoning, said that this project was dead. It should be dead. If the planning and zoning, if the zoning commission person says the project's dead for a year and a half, or for a decade and a half, it should stay dead. It shouldn't be. And then let me wrap up. One of the panel's members at the August 20 hearing just a few months ago said the project does not fit, and she didn't think it was right. But then she voted yes. So we're asking for you folks to deny this project. Thanks for having us up here. We really want to state that one of the real key things that isn't happening. Mr. Smith talked about his properties, but he didn't talk about the meeting with his neighbors. I live across the street from this. I've never got a call, never an email, never a meeting. Nobody's knocked on my door or the neighbor next door. The easements on the site triangle are not in place. They showed us site triangles going over the neighbors' properties. There's no easements for those. So on that basis alone, that's a big enough technicality to deny this. If they can't fit, they shouldn't be approved.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask. Go ahead. And what I want to do is I'm going to ask if there's anyone else here that didn't sign up that would like to speak, and then after consulting with the chair pro tem, we're going to ask Mr. Beam to come back up for an additional 3 minutes. But we want you to wrap up in that 3 minutes. But first, is there anyone else here that would like to speak in the public hearing? Seeing none, then Mr. Beam, would you please come back up? And I didn't mean to be rude. We do have some rules that we try to get through, and we have another public hearing after this, as a matter of fact. So.
I understand that. Normally I don't get all bent out of shape about stuff like this, but there's so many wrong things, and I'm a guy that checks plans. It frustrates me. And I'm sorry, I apologize for my behavior as well.
No problem.
I really want to talk about this street, backing up, backing in and out. I know it's a real important thing because we have, as I started to say, we only have 21 feet. The fire department requires a minimum of 20 feet. They need to get out of their trucks. They need to do their thing. If a car is parked right up against the curb, directly up against the curb. Nobody does that. So we know it's going to be more than 9 feet. It's going to average around 11 feet. Plus they have to drive in, turn around, and be proper that way. He mentioned a 3-point turn. That's a real fun thing for everybody that lives in the neighborhood and everybody that comes to visit them. It's going to all happen at the end of that street where the curbs are. Or they're going to drive over the curbs, which they shouldn't be allowed to do because it's not a street. Basically, it should be considered an alley, and I'm not sure what they're considering it. The side triangle I showed you, the side triangle for a road starts from the middle of the road. They started it from over on the side of the property. It goes 30 feet back from the center of the road out. So they weren't really showing you the exact thing. They were kind of showing you a little bit of a similar thing. They do need to get those easements. Those easements are not in place. Your documentation says that if they're not in place, this cannot move forward. So you heard that twice. The fire department completely agreed with me that, actually I didn't even say it, they brought it up, the backing up any of the trucks, Penny had brought that up. That sort of a distance is a major problem, because they only have 30 feet. A lot of trucks are longer than 30 feet. So they only have 30 feet to try to back up with cars, probably not in the right place. You have a 20-foot space backing out of your garage that are all lined up against there. If you have an 18-foot vehicle, that's a pretty tough thing to do, to back a truck or an SUV out into that small space. It's done all the time in Cherry Creek. People do it. You know, if you're keeping your garage clean and you can get in and out of there and there's no snow and there's no ice and there's no emergencies and everything works perfect. This isn't that case. We all know that. We know that, you know, I asked him about the playground. I asked him about gates, and he said, they can absolutely have nothing in that space ever. That's probably not going to happen if there's families there. Even in their pictures, they show them walking across that space. So I'm concerned about that. That's the main concern. The drainage is a pretty big concern. They make it look pretty and nice, but we all know that pretty nice doesn't look like that after a few years. Those drainage ponds, however great they are, we have several of them around the neighborhood, and I wish I could show you pictures of those, but I didn't. They don't look like that. They are a trash pit full of everything, you know, and we know that's how it is. We know that's how it'll end up. We're not happy with that. We love the pictures. We want him to do a really good job. We know that by all the spacing and all the engineering and all the things we've gone through for years, that 16 units is just too much. We really would like to see it go to 14. If they could do that, they'd have much more space. They could move their roads. They could make a safe environment for everyone, for everything that's considered, all their travel. I mean, daily, how many people are on Amazon? All of you. You all get a package. Some people get them every day. This is a problem. I've talked to the trash company. They're like, we don't like it, but we'll deal with it. You know, trash trucks are big. So I think based on that technical information, they don't have that in place. We need to deny this or continue this. Your choice is to deny it, continue it, or approve it. They need to redesign it. They need to look at it in a stronger way.
Thank you, Mr. P.
Thank you so much for letting me finish that.
No problem. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Are there questions for staff or the applicant that Bill Skinner, please come forward, and we have a couple. I saw you taking notes, so if you want to try to address any of the questions you heard, and then the commissioners have some comments or questions for you.
Okay. So I highlighted some of these, took a lot of notes, but highlighted the points. Is fire aware of the additional on-street parking? Yeah, they are. That was so important a conversation. I didn't even kick that to the applicant like we usually did. I handled that myself twice. They approved of it twice. They gave us a letter saying they approve of this plan. It's in the board summary report. They were invited to come on the 15th, but we continued. Fire couldn't come today, weather. So they get very busy. They're canceling meetings with us outside this as well. The issue about fire trucks backing, that came up a number of times. The entire point of that turn plan that was shown, the outline with the yellow squiggles through it, that is a highly engineered drawing based on the exact wheel tracks of all 10 tires on the exact piece of equipment the fire department owns and would bring to that site. It works. They don't have to back up. They wiggle through that middle bit. I realize wiggle isn't a technical term, but I don't doubt that Tim had a conversation with Jeff and he took away what he took away, but I talked to Jeff. Jeff reviewed this. I'm a little confused by the two different messages. We can circle back, but even if we were to do that, those are site plan criteria that the Planning Commission already heard a couple of times and knocked back. But we can certainly revisit fire. Site triangles. I believe, and the county engineering section believes, that those are accurate depictions. And they've added a condition of approval to the plat that says that the plat won't be recorded until the easements are established on the adjacent private properties for those site triangles. Probably doesn't sound or feel like it right now in the room, but we are entirely on board with the neighbors about the site triangles on the private property. It's an issue for us too. The plat can't be recorded if that condition is adopted until they've shown us those easement agreements. Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Skinner, can you just clarify recorded and what that means in terms of the development? Can the development go forward before these are done, or does this have to get done before?
Fair point. For some order of operations here, we're here with the plat starting today. We're here with the plat for a county commissioner approval or denial. You can approve this plat, and if they can't record the plat, which means take the finalized documents to the clerk and recorder for them to record it, your approval basically is accepted but goes moot until that plat is recorded. The condition of approval that says they need to show us evidence of these easements being established, that means that our own mapping and surveying section will look at those agreements, our engineering section will look at those agreements, determine if they are adequate. If they are, actually, we'll probably forward them to the county attorney as well, just in case. If they can't establish those easements, we won't forward the plat, the staff won't forward the plat for recording. That means they have not created the legally defined properties they need in order to transfer ownership to homeowners. And were they to try and do that without a documented plat that creates those lots, it's a misdemeanor in the state of Colorado. So I guess what I'm saying is there are a handful of different fail-safe mechanisms in place between today and someone building those homes.
Mr. Chair, just to make sure that if that is a condition of approval, then the risk would be on the developer, or if it's a condition for approval, recording the plat, they could not go ahead and begin construction unless those easements were recorded. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
There's not a direct relationship. There is a cause and effect relationship, which means your statement is accurate and correct. Yes.
I mean, I suppose they could build and take the risk, and then it couldn't be recorded, and they couldn't sell the homes, which sort of,
until it's platted, they can't actually sell that real estate.
Commissioner Jackson.
Excuse me, I think we all have a little bit of a cold here. So you are probably going to speak to this, I don't know, but the issue of density came up a bunch of times. And I'd like you to kind of walk through what the parameters are on this particular piece of land. And then also someone mentioned multifamily housing, and it was my understanding that multifamily, the definition of multifamily was something else other than what this is. So help us clarify the issues of density around this particular piece of land.
Okay. First question, simpler question. The multifamily issue. Arapahoe County does not define paired homes or duplexes as multifamily. They're single family attached. The other end of the scale would be single family detached. Multifamily would be apartments, so forth, walk-ups. It's a little more nuanced than that, but that's the broad brush. In this neighborhood, we don't have to go out more than half a block either way up the street, just to stay ahead of what may be forming up in people's heads. I do agree that the majority of the addresses on the streets north and south of this project are single-family detached homes on lots large enough that the density is lower. But we don't look at only one end of the scale. The scale also goes to another duplex development, which is at a slightly higher density, approximately 350 feet away from this to the northeast on the other side of the street that borders it on the north. If we go half a block west, then we're into multi-story condos at a development, I think it's called Westboro Sky. Now that is a case of that comp plan discussion or comp plan recommendation that was brought up earlier from the podium, where the comp plan does say the county recommends, comp plan recommendation, recommend putting multifamily on arterials. Parker is an arterial, that multifamily is on Parker. The back of it is on a local collector, but still. We did consider the comprehensive plan. We were trying to follow those recommendations. There have been rare cases when we brought something to the board that did not specifically follow a comprehensive plan recommendation, but we absolutely point that out in the report and from the podium. We believe we're aligned with the comprehensive plan recommendation.
Additional questions for Mr. Skinner? Commissioner Sharp, for the applicant.
I think you have some more.
Oh, okay.
Yes, please. Absolutely. Don't know if we want to get into the discussion of the neighborhood plan and the recommendation for 1 to 2 DU per unit. Been through this at a number of hearings now, but to restate, there is a sub-area plan in place that was approved in 2005. It does recommend in this area 1 to 2 DU, 1 to 2 homes, dwelling units per acre. This plan is based on the La Teresa preliminary development plan, which established the first step in a PUD process that allowed 16 units on this 2.27 acre property. The board was clear with staff, and staff was clear with the public at the meetings, and there were a lot of meetings leading up to that sub-area plan adoption, that existing zoning entitlements were to remain in place. The board at that time did not want to effectively downzone property with a sub-area plan. That's how we got here. Penny was very astute, very observant. She brought up that the PUD process is a 2-step process when the La Teresa plan was approved. They needed a preliminary development plan and then a very detailed site plan to move forward. In April of 2018, the county amended our PUD process. So the second step in this, instead of being 2 steps, preliminary development plan, final development plan, we've actually increased the amount of review on these. So we are using and allowing this existing entitlement of a preliminary development plan to stand. Then we move through a middle ground step of re-examining the zoning with a little more detail in the specific development plan that went to the Planning Commission twice. And the staff will move on through the nuts and bolts. What kind of bush is this? How many inches wide is this sidewalk review in an administrative site plan? To add some reinforcement to the site triangle issue, we won't approve that administrative site plan without those site triangles fully established and the easements in place. So that's yet another layer of how we're going to cover the site triangles. Let's see. Owen Bunker's issue. I empathize with Owen when he was looking at purchasing his property. I empathize with a retired zoning enforcement official, Tammy King, when she said it didn't look like Ronnie Levine would ever be able to build the property out. I think both sides of those stories are true. However, Ronnie left the plan in place and then sold the property. He's not building it. He doesn't own the property anymore. The zoning entitlement rode with the land. I think Tammy was telling the truth when she said she didn't think he had the chops to build that project. No one really anticipated a decade later someone else would come along, think it through, work out the details, and find a way to do it. But that doesn't make it any less doable. Having said that, I did want to say I empathize with Owen's position and Tammy. I mean, everyone was doing the best they could with what they had at hand on the day they were asking or asked. Next one, fire department backing out. I think I went through that. Fire doesn't have to back out. To the point that delivery trucks may have to back out. I know a couple people in that business. They said they're not going to go up that driveway in the first place because they're not going to leave that package at the garage door. They're going to take that package to the front door. They're going to do exactly what they do in my neighborhood in urban Denver. They're going to pull to the curb where they can, turn on their blinkers. They're going to walk up the sidewalk and leave the package at the front door. It's unlikely that an Amazon driver, well, Amazon's hiring a lot of part-time people, but it's unlikely that a full-time UPS or FDL driver is going to take their truck up that and then want to back out of it. Having said that, they're fully qualified to do so. Part of their job is backing those trucks into docks multiple times every day. The people I talked to didn't feel like it would be an issue. Not optimal, but they didn't feel like it would be a problem. Someone mentioned the center area as a playground. It is supposed to be a bit of a recreational space, but not a playground, no permanent equipment installed, nothing like that. Drainage ponds. The green spaces shown on those plans are not drainage ponds. They're green spaces. There are smaller areas at the ends of them that were shown that they're more heavily planted. That's where the water is actually intercepted, collected, and then recleaned and retreated, and then it goes into the pipe and the ground. And my last note says package trucks again, so that's where I'm at with that. I apologize. I am up here giving you a ton of detail on site plan issues, and I hope I'm not creating a conflict. But we're trying to respond to the public concerns.
Commissioner Sharp. So who maintains the drainage and then the green spaces? Is there an HOA? Will there be an HOA? So that will maintain all that property. So work continues. The drainage continues to work as planned.
Yep.
Right.
If the drainage were to fail to work, the Southeast Metro Stormwater Association will essentially step in and forcibly maintain it.
So homeowners could contact SEMSWA and ensure that that gets done.
It's likely they would.
Since two of us sit on that board.
Fair enough. It's likely they would call the county first.
Okay.
And we would be in the middle of referring them to SEMSWA and working it out.
Mr. Hill?
I was just going to say, we preserve that right in the drainage easements.
Okay.
And the county's stormwater management policies and requirements is that the owner is obligated to maintain those retention facilities, whatever they may be, and if the homeowner doesn't do it, the county can go in and do it and bill the cost to the homeowner.
So there's recourse. I guess I just want to make sure that there's recourse if they are not maintained properly. And I know the zoning, which has really been a big thing here since the very beginning, and with Tammy King's comments, and I appreciate your comments. I guess I just want to, from a legal standpoint, when the land had that zoning carried with it, and when if somebody else had come in earlier and asked to rezone the property to single-family homes or something like that, that would have been could have come back to this board and been considered. However, since the property was purchased with that zoning, that's to come back in at this point legally, that's not something that our board can change. Am I correct? Because they purchased the property with that zoning in place.
They purchased with that zoning, and they have the ability to develop the property in accordance with that zoning. Had at some point after that initial zoning approval was made, had someone come in and said, I want to just turn this into a one lot, put a single family house on it and use that whole, he could have done that. But he would have needed to come in and get it rezoned.
Had a public hearing and gone through the whole process for zoning change.
Okay. Could have come back as an amendment to the PUD. It could have theoretically come in and said, we want to put a commercial development here and we want to change the zoning. But that never happened. So the zoning was set in 2003, and the property sold hands. The new owner wants to develop it under the existing zoning, and he can do that.
Additional questions for Mr. Skinner or the applicant at this? Commissioner Conti? Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you. I'm not sure. Sorry. Mr. Skinner, I'm not sure you can answer this question. This may be for the applicant. But several times people mentioned that the applicant had not met with them. That, and so I am not sure whether the applicant in their presentation said that they did meet with the adjacent homeowners, and some of the homeowners are saying they didn't meet with us. So I'm a little confused. I do know, I saw the photo, and I do know they did meet with Foursquare Mile, but that's different than whatever other discussions they had. I'm not sure that's a criteria of approval, but I just want to clear that up, just for my own comfort.
Okay, I'm going to move this to the applicant, but first I'm going to take some responsibility for the situation. Staff did send them to Foursquare Mile area. We do that with everyone in the Foursquare Mile area, and the applicant dutifully went and talked to them. In other public hearings, some of the neighbors have said, well, that's not our local HOA. That's correct, too. There's a local HOA. We didn't specifically hand that information over to the applicant. We understood they were doing door-to-door work, which they've done some door-to-door work. So we may have a bit of a miscommunication there, and I don't think either the applicant or the neighbors are misrepresenting the situation. I think there was a good faith effort, and it just didn't get to everyone. If we'd still like to talk to the applicant, I'm happy to do that. But actually, it may be, because I don't think I'm adequately representing the efforts they did make, and I'd like them to be able to speak for themselves.
I would too, and I'd also like to know if after, because this is our third meeting on this, and so I'm wondering if between, let's say, the first meeting and this meeting, if either, I don't want to say side, but either the applicant or the homeowners said, wait a minute, sounds like we need to meet, and either initiated by the homeowners or the applicant. I'm just curious as to if there was some progress made in the interim.
Sure. Shall we do that now?
Mr. Smith, if you could come forward, please. And I think the question revolves around efforts for neighbor outreach.
Sure. As I mentioned in our presentation, we met with the 4 square mile area. We went to their neighborhood meeting. Everyone who spoke today was at that meeting. So we fielded. My apologies.
I tried to contact him between the last meeting and this meeting several times. He never returned my call or call. Sorry, that's a lie.
My apologies. I thought Mr. Beam was there. Apparently he wasn't.
Hang on. No shouting out.
So we went to that meeting. We solicited the feedback of the neighborhood. We changed what we could, agreed to disagree where we couldn't. Following that meeting, when neighbors reached out to us, we met with them in our office. We met with them on site. We've exchanged multiple emails with people. If Mr. Beam has tried to contact me, I haven't had a message from him on my office phone. So,
have you? I think.
And we didn't reach out.
Did you knock on some doors?
No.
But you're pretty clear that you did not receive any, and this is not a law. This is not a court of law, so you're not on trial, sir, at all. But I'm just trying to figure out that you made good effort, whatever that may be, to work with the neighbors. That's all I'm asking.
I mean, I think we've done more than typical developers would do. It's more than we typically do on projects. And we've had people in our office. Again, we have met people on site. We've exchanged multiple emails with people. I mean, short of going around the neighborhood and knocking on every single door, I don't know what else we could have done.
Commissioner Conti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it would be an easy thing right now for you to pull back up the diagram that you had of the overview of the development. But one of the things that was coming to my mind as I was kind of thinking through regular everyday life, I know in my own neighborhood, everyone has a 2-car garage. How many times do you see cars parked in the driveway or on the street because good stuff, has taken over the garage, and now, of course, the cars are relegated to either the driveway or the streets. And so I'm wondering to myself, what is the plan for that if that should happen to one of our homeowners? Where on the street are they going to park, and how is that going to then impede or allow the emergency access from the fire trucks, et cetera?
So every house has a 2-car garage to start.
Mm-hmm.
There is an additional 4 spaces on this side as well. And then within these private drives, there's parking for an additional 18 spaces.
Just so I can be clear, so you're talking about a parallel space along a garage door?
Correct. Well,
pull up the auto turn document. Yeah. The auto turn document is what the fire department judged this on, and it shows the streets. You had it there for a second. It shows the street side parking, and it specifically shows. So do you see, if I may, Bill for the planning department again, you see the no parking zones that are red striped off?
Mm-hmm.
So those are areas where the fire department specifically prohibited curbside parking along those 2 drives because the bumpers of the trucks did need to swing into those areas. In between those red prohibited areas, there would be curbside parking. Is that adequate?
Yeah, that's correct.
So, and we're talking parallel parking, and that's not going to impede their ability to get down that lane?
No, ma'am. The yellow tracks are the wheel tracks. Those assume that there could be cars parked along the side of the street in between the prohibited zones.
Wow.
So that was the whole reason I had the second and third conversation with the fire department was because at the planning commission, the initial hearing, there was a lot of commentary about not enough in development parking. So we went back to the fire department specifically to talk about could they put parking on the street. It turned out the original reason parking couldn't go on the street was a misunderstanding about width of easements, and it could have been there all along. So once I cleared that up, we went ahead and this came out, street side parking, and then we went back at them a second time and re-verified it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Follow up if I could. Forgive me for, my commentary, but there just doesn't appear to be a lot of room for error. I mean, if somebody comes down there, and let's put this, you're in an emergency situation. Things are happening quickly. There just doesn't appear to be a lot of fudge factor.
I understand that. I think I would carefully point out that what is an emergency situation for the rest of us is everyday business for them, and they picked a number, and that number was the width of the deployment area they need, and the applicant came up with a plan that meets that number. I mean, we've done exactly what the fire department, well, I shouldn't say we, but the applicant has done exactly what the fire department has requested.
Further question on this fire. If, let's say, third, fourth, one of the middle two units, on the end, let's say they have a Christmas tree fire. Starts in the living room, front of the house. Obviously, no street there.
How do they get to that?
Yeah.
There's a maximum hose deployment length that the fire truck allows where they can park a truck and then spool out a hose and fight that fire where the truck is removed at some distance. In this case, they can deploy in the center emergency access easement or on East Colorado or on East Mexico. And we've seen it. If they need the right-of-way, they block the right-of-way and they do what they have to do. And they would spool the hose down the fronts of the units to the middle of the fronts of the units. Those 6-foot privacy fences that are between those units, I can go through one of those if I'm not careful. I'm sure they'll just knock that thing down and take the hose around the front of the house from the alley if they feel the need to. The best answer I could give you, but we go back and ask them.
Yeah, but I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're going to, I'm going to recognize Commissioner Jackson here.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to, even though the day is getting long and people are getting concerned about driving home and so on, I think it would be helpful for the board to call just a short executive session to get some legal advice about the parameters for our decision before we come back and make that decision.
So, Mr. Hill, can you suggest the statute citation for that particular motion?
Yes, it's going to be CRS 24-10-4024B. It's a motion to go into executive session for purposes of receiving legal advice regarding the Polidora subdivision final plat application hearing.
So moved? Yeah, so moved. Is there a second? Commissioner Holland. Motion made by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Holland. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstention? We're going to take a short recess. We'll be in the West hearing room, and then we'll return. All right. Thank you. Our apologies. We are back, and I declare us back from out of executive session into our public hearing. We've had a chance to receive some legal advice from our county attorneys. And I'll just ask if there's any more comments or questions from any of the commissioners. If not, I would entertain a motion. Chair recognizes Commissioner Jackson for the purposes of a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In view of the fact that we've had 3 public hearings, or we've had to continue it, and taken testimony a number of times, we've heard from our engineers. We have the fire department that has been checked with a number of times, the water department, sewage and draining. The zoning was in place and would have to be separately reapplied for, so the zoning is already there. And so in view of these items, which are basically our parameters for making the decision, I understand that the neighbors are quite involved in this process. My hope is going forward that that this, should this be approved, that that this development would earn their approval. However, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that in the case of PF 19-001, the Paula Dora filing number final plat, I have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to approve this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. And these are important. Number 1, prior to the signature of the final copy of these plans, the applicant must address Public Works staff comments and concerns, including those provided in the Engineering Services Division staff report dated September 26, 2019. 2, prior to the signature of the final copy of these plans, the applicant must provide cash in lieu payments in the following amounts as detailed in the attached staff report. Public schools, $70,870.94. Public parks, $62,464.90. And other public uses, $2,602.70, for a total of $135,938.54. 3, the approval of PF 19-001, Paula Dora filing number 14, final plat, is contingent on the approval of the concurrent ASP 19-002 Highline East Administrative Site Plan. And 4, off-site distance line easements are required from the property owners if the site distance line is located off of the project site. These easements must be recorded prior to the Board of County Commissioners' signature on the final plat.
Motion made by Commissioner Jackson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then that motion carries. No opposed, no abstentions. That motion carries. Commissioner Sharp.
I just had a question on which was my question on the recording, that so point 4 does say what we intended.
Yes, those easements will have to be in place prior to the BOCC's signature in the plat. So the plat can't be recorded until the BOCC has signed its final approval.
Okay.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We appreciate it. We're going to move on to the next public hearing.
May I just say thank you, everybody. I want to thank both the applicant and the citizens for going through this process, and we appreciate all points of view. So thank you.
All right, and the next public hearing is case number SD 19-001, Prosper Metropolitan District Service Plan Amendment. This presentation is also going to be presented by Bill Skinner, and the county attorney on this matter is also Robert Hill, the senior county attorney, assistant county attorney. So would you please lay the foundation for this presentation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for amendment of service plans for Prosper Metropolitan Districts 1 through 4 and for approval of new service plans for new Prosper Metropolitan Service Districts 5 through 10. This matter has been noticed by publication in the Villager newspaper, as well as the applicant has notified any property owners within the proposed districts of the public hearing, and they've notified any ad valorem taxing entity within 3 miles of the proposed districts. The board has jurisdiction to proceed as notice requirements have been met.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Once again, good morning, Mr. Skinner. Please proceed.
Good morning, Commissioners. SD 19-001, Prosper Metropolitan District Service Plan Amendment. Prosper Farms is asking to amend the service plan they established through proper channels and procedures with the county in 2014. The attorney has explained that our notice is adequate. Staff has reviewed the service plan amendment, and including to refer that out to a financial consultant who has suggested an amendment that has been incorporated into this, and staff believes the applicant has met the criteria for approval. Would we like to hear from the applicant on this?
I do know, I recall that we actually had a study session about this, and we saw it on the pending agendas and asked for that specific study session, and I appreciated your attachment of the same kind of clarifying diagram. So I'm not sure that I necessarily need to hear from the applicant. Any other commissioners? Don't. Commissioner Jackson has a question.
Just in view of the fact that the weather is bad and you drove so far, if you have comment from the applicant, I'd be willing to hear it. I don't have any specific questions, however.
I don't have any specific questions, and I will. I'm planning to make the motion for approval. So if there's any comments, since you drove all the way here in snowy weather, we'd like to just give you that opportunity. Anyway, this is a public hearing, so we had no one sign up to speak either in support or opposed. Open the public hearing. Anyone here to speak on Prosper Metropolitan District Service Plan Amendment? Seeing none, I will close public hearing. And any further discussion? I will read the motion of approval in the case of SD 19-001, Prosper Metropolitan District Service Plan Amendment. I have reviewed the staff report, including all exhibits and attachments, and have listened to the applicant's presentation and any public comment as presented at the hearing, and hereby move to approve this application based on the findings in the staff report, subject to the following conditions. 1, not less than 14 days prior to the issuance of any bonds, excluding refunding bonds, the issuing district shall provide the County Planning Division with notice of the district's intent to issue bonds, together with the district's plan of finance for the issuance of the bonds, and a report or an updated report if one was previously issued from a third-party market research firm or a market research analyst that has been engaged in analyzing residential and commercial market conditions for at least 5 years. The market analyst that it has reviewed the financial projections regarding absorption utilized in sizing the proposed bond, including but not limited to absorption rates, valuation, growth, and inflation rates, and has evaluated the same in comparison to current and projected market conditions for Arapahoe County and or such other areas deemed by such market analysts to be comparable, and that such financial projections are reasonable. Additionally, on the date of closing for the bonds, the issuing district shall deliver to the County Planning Division an opinion of council that the bonds are being issued in compliance with the applicable provisions of the district's service plan. 2, the applicant will make continuing changes or modifications to the 14 service plans to address conditions of approval recommended by the Planning Commission or the Board of County Commissioners, if any. That's the end of the motion.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Baker, seconded by Commissioner Sharp. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much, and that has been approved unanimously.
Thank you.
We have one additional public hearing. Let me get to the right place here. Thank you very much. This is item 7E on our agenda. This is a public hearing, the continuation of a temporary moratorium on applications for billboards and off-premises signs. The presenter will be Kathleen Hammer, planner too, with Public Works and Development. The attorney on this is Robert Hill, the senior assistant county attorney. Mr. Hill, would you please set the foundation for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This, as the board may recall, the board had approved a moratorium on new billboard signs and conversion of electronic or existing billboards to electronic message board billboards. That moratorium is scheduled to expire on November 7th. Staff is coming back and asking to extend that moratorium. This request for an extension has been noticed for a public hearing by publication in the Villager newspaper, and the board has jurisdiction to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Good morning, Ms. Hammer.
Good morning, Commissioners. Maybe good afternoon. Like Mr. Hill reiterated, you did approve a moratorium for 6 months that is set to expire in coming days. The reason I am here today is to outline, why we are requesting a extension on this moratorium. The board and staff have held 3 study sessions on this item, and I have provided the board with a tentative schedule moving forward. After this 3-month extension, if approved, we hope to have new regulations adopted, if necessary. I stand for any questions.
This extension is for 3 months, so it's basically correct? Is it
correct?
Three additional months. So it's not a full extension of another resolution, which is normally 6 months. And I know that we dislike moratoriums unless they're absolutely necessary, and I think that was very well communicated in your study sessions. So other questions from county commissioners at this time? Seeing none, we will open it up for public hearing. There was no one to sign up, and the room is emptied for the most part. Are there any public comments on the temporary moratorium, the extension for 3 additional months for the temporary moratorium? No? No additional comments. So I will end the public hearing, and any further discussion or any motions? Okay.
Okay, so in the matter of the request to extend a temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for any new billboard or other off-premise sign, and on the applications for conversion of any existing billboard or other off-premise sign to an electronic messaging sign, I have considered the planning staff recommendation, reviewed the board's summary report, and heard such public testimony and staff comment as was presented to the board at public hearing this day. I move that the Board of County Commissioners adopt by resolution an extension to the temporary moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for such billboards or other off-premise signs and conversion of any existing billboard or off-premise sign to an electronic messaging sign as presented to the board. Such moratorium shall be extended for an additional 3 months to February 7th, 2020.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Jackson, seconded by Commissioner Sharp. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Are there any commissioner comments this morning? If not, we are adjourned.
Sentences and not make any sentence longer than 3 lines long.
You're talking to attorneys?
Yeah,
I'm not sure that works.
Yeah,
for
I don't know if I
attorneys.
can do that.
Thank you for coming. I just want to let you know.
That in law school.
No.